Hello, this is Kevin. Today's topic is showing how to create a report. So I'm going to start with kind of the final of just kind of something I threw together here. And it's really a report that everyone needs, but no one really knew to ask if it was even possible. So estimators work with a few estimates at a time, juggling them and so forth, but not very many estimators really go back and utilize some of the historical information that some clients out there have hundreds and thousands of estimates through the years that are sitting out there, but they don't really have a good way of data mining it and really using that information to compare high and lows with current processes or current projects and things like that. So that's kind of what I wanted to get into here, is just kind of showing you A, kind of what could be done, and B, the detail of how I built the one we're looking at then. So let's get started. This report is built in Power BI. So I'm going to open it up here. And what this report is doing is it's pulling my Sage estimating data. This is basically a grid or a table of data. So right now, this table, and I'm going to go ahead and let's clear some filters here. So this table basically has every estimate I've got on my system and every item within every estimate. So right now, as I'm looking through here, this is just going to show me project classes. So if I've got projects flagged as a school or retail or something of that nature, it's going to show me what type of a project it is, the name of the project, the item description. In my case, I'm just kind of focusing on just a small subset of my data. So I'm just looking at material quantities, material prices, material amounts, but this could be subs. So if I want to compare subs across multiple estimates or add more columns, that's all possible also. And then I also have a year and a month as far as when this was last updated in an estimate. So I have a rough idea of how old some of this data may be. So this is just a grid of every single item of every single estimate I've got out there. So down here on these cards, I'll see a count. So I've got about 3,300 items. Some of my items don't have money, the average dollar amount of my items, and the maximum. Then these are called slicers. So these are things that can actually take my data and filter that data for me. So I've got a slicer for different types of projects. So if I said hotels, let's not have any flagged at hotels at the moment. Let's look at, as a matter of fact, I probably got this date range on there. Make sure these are all off. Okay, let's look at schools. So if I take a look at what things I've got in here with schools, it could show me every single project that was flagged as a school, whatever estimate it was called. So like this case, I've only got a couple estimates out there. It looks like an estimate 1 and estimate 5 and all the different line items out of those estimates. So this is just a way that I could go through and actually filter some list of whatever I've got in my report. So if you notice, the neat thing about these reports are they're kind of interactive, that as I work with these different cells, it can change the grid that's up here at the top. So for an example, if I want to put a date range on, which I'll do in a moment, or in this case, I want to search for a description. So I want to go find something to do with concrete. So in this case here, it's basically filtered out 95 of those 3,000 items in my data have to do with concrete. So as I scroll up and down, you'll notice that all these have some sort of a description that contains conc in it. And I could put 35,000 or 3,500 or some strength or something of that nature if I wanted to. So in this case, as I go down through, you'll just kind of see the 95 items. Some of them don't have dollar amounts. So I've got an average about $66 on these and some sort of a maximum going on. Now, as I look down through there, you'll also start to see that I've got some retail or schools or things like that. So there again, if I come back and say, well, just show me a project class of retail, maybe I've only got 3 items. So in this case here, I've got 1 item that's in 2 items in one estimate and 1 item in another estimate. So those are the main ones that now I can use that maybe information to say, I'm working on another current retail project. Maybe I want to go through and show me all of my other estimates where I've had block in it, I've had electrical work in it, I've had some item description, and it could go through and show me how many I've got, what the minimum was, what the average has been, what the maximum is. So maybe on retail, I'm running about $133 a yard, but maybe if I come over here and said, well, let's turn retail off for a moment and let's turn schools on. But my school average might be 138, so it's a little bit higher for some reason. So pretty cool that you can actually go through with no effort and be able to cross-relate information in any of these estimates to try to figure out where's consistency and so forth. Now, if I go back here and click on it again, it goes back to all the data that's in my list. That has this condition at the moment because I've still got my conch on there. I'm going to go ahead and hit the little eraser here to clear the search, so that way it'll go back to my whole entire database. Now, in my database, a lot of stuff's been thrown in here through the years and so forth. So in my case, maybe I just want to focus on stuff that was added to has a price update. So right now I'm doing material price change date. So this is basically the date that that item was either updated in the database when it was dropped in an estimate, or if somebody went in and updated the estimate to a newer price than what was in the database, whatever that date is. So in my case, if I said 1/1/2025 all the way through today, I'll see that I've got 66 different items that have been updated sometime this year. So I notice that all my years and months have something to do with this year. And there again, if I come back and said, okay, well, let's go back and look for that concrete, maybe I can go off and filter. There's the items and minimum and averages and maximum prices of some sort of a range. And there again, I've got maybe a couple estimates here that I don't know what I was doing, why I didn't have $0 on those. I don't even have a project class on those and so forth. So that's where I might want to go back and say, well, all I really want to do is focus on maybe retail and school so I can get rid of that other garbage out of the list there. So I'm going to say I want retail and school. Excuse me, one or the other. So that way it showed me there's what the schools was on that section of things, or here's what the retail was. Just a way of going back through that data of all your estimates. So no matter how many estimates you have out there, it might take a few seconds longer than mine to run here and so forth. But a very nice way that if someone's working on an estimate, I want to kind of spot check this number. Very powerful way that I could go through and say what type of a project, what type of date ranges do I want on when that price was last updated, what type of an item am I looking for. So maybe if I look for a gypsum wallboard or something of that nature for my retail stuff, that's the only couple items out there. And here's what the price per square foot was. Or there again, if I release this, it would go back and show me any of the different classes. Or if I told it to release my date range, maybe it would go back through and say, okay, there's all my entries, because I've got some that weren't updated, but all for some reason. Very powerful and very easy for someone to build something like this yourself. So this is one of the things that's kind of interesting about Power BI is the fact that each one of these little slicers can actually go back and actually work with some grouping of that data, all kind of interact with each other. So that way, like date range, I could slide the slider here. So I could say, well, I want to see only things from 2004 through 2015, which I probably don't have any. Maybe I'll go a little wider. Oh, I've got the gypsum wallboard on. I probably don't have a bunch in there for that. So that way, if I kind of go back and do some other filtering, I could do just straight date ranges. I could do classes, descriptions. So any type of combination thereof. And this could be, right now, I'm showing a bunch of individual line items, but these columns are all definable. So this could show me what building, what floor, what room. So there again, if I want to go back and, hey, we got a cold water system that's floor 2, what's the other estimates it's had that, where maybe we've done that for the same client on a particular project, and where's it at, what estimate was that in, what rate did we use at that case. Very powerful to use that arsenal of existing estimates you have to proof that out. So that's basically the report on hand that we're going to take a look at how to build. So that way you could go off now, if that looks like something of interest, how would I build something like that on my own? So let's go ahead and get started going down a different direction here then. So I'm going to go ahead and for right now, I'm just going to close this Power BI down and I'm going to say, no, don't save that one. And I want to go back to estimating and talk about some setup and kind of get prepared for some of the things that I've set up in my estimating to really achieve good values and so forth in these numbers. So I'm just going to open up estimating. I'm also going to open up Management Console. So under Management Console, I have a list of all my different databases and so forth that I've got out there. So most clients are going to have one active one that they're primarily working with and so forth. So whatever that database is, that's where you'll want to kind of start off with. If you keep in mind, I was able to go through and do some things like filtering by project class. And you'll notice that I had a few flaws in there because through the years I didn't have this set up. So I had some set at school and some set for schools with an S, or some for retail and some for retail stores or something of that nature. So having this set up can really keep someone consistent in the data that we're putting in. So for example, I'm highlighting my database. I go up to edit and I've got something called project type. So over here, I've got a defined list where you could go in and define what you want that drop-down list to be of different types of projects. So initially, this is where you can get it set up. So as soon as someone creates an estimate, they see this, they get to pick something right from the list to help keep someone consistent with types of projects. So in my case, I'm just going to say school, warehouse, retail stores, whatever it may be. Estimator, same type of thing. Maybe I wanted to take that list and filter it by different estimators. So I could come in here and put in some sort of a drop-down list so that way I can see different estimators. That way they're spelled consistently. So it's a drop-down list that someone sees. I'm not going to work with estimator at the moment. User-defined fields. So this is where you can actually set up your own definable fields. So for example, one thing that I do on some of my other reports is when people have estimates out there, it's very common that they might have, I built this estimate and I made a copy of it, made some revisions and made a copy of it, made some revisions. So on design, build, and negotiated work, I might have 10, 15 different estimates out there for the same project. So my thought here was show on reports would be something that somebody could do like a yes, no, and actually know these are the estimates that I want to show up on the report. So I don't want to see the same report on there 15 times. I want to see the final version on the report. So if I'm trying to do yearly totals or something of that nature, so in that particular case, I just kind of set something up there so that way I could put something in. It was going to be text and so forth. Estimate status is kind of the same way, so that way I can have different statuses to try to stay consistent with and so forth. Now, as you're looking at these, this is where you can actually go in and give them names. So I can call it what I want to call it and so forth. But this is also where you can actually change, is that going to be a text field? Is it going to be a date field? So maybe if I had estimated started date, what's the estimated finish date? What's the plan date or the structural plan date or things like that? I could put in some sort of a date. Maybe I want it to be a list. So like estimate status in my mind probably should be more of like a list. So maybe I could go in here and say, maybe we got jobs that we're currently bidding. Maybe we got jobs that are pending that hasn't been decided yet. Maybe we got jobs that we've lost and jobs that we are awarded. So there again, now I can say estimate status and have some sort of a standardized drop-down list. So when an estimator is going through and working with a project, I can get these in here and keep them standardized. So a couple of these are hard set. So project type, pretty hard set. Estimator, pretty hard set. And then you've got 16 other fields that you can define what you want that field name to be, what type of a field it is. And in some cases, if it's going to be a list, actually define what that drop-down box is going to be in the association. So That's some of the homework to kind of get better estimates being tracked with more information. So that way, if I want to say there again, maybe we break off a lot of our estimates in different, we work across the whole countryside, and maybe we got the whole countryside broke off into zones. So I can say, yep, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, or something of that nature. And that just look at the reports associated with my zone or the estimates associated with my zone and so forth. So these can pretty much be all sorts of information for better reporting and trying to get the group down to what I'm looking for. So with that being said, if I go and look at my estimates, each estimate has pretty much the same information associated with it also. So each estimate, when I look at a particular estimate, it could have an estimator associated with it, a project type associated with it, things of that nature. It could have whatever you've got for your definable fields and so forth. So as somebody gets in there and they're putting these in, so that way I could be looking at a particular estimate, instead of going to the estimate, going to the info page and things like that, I could come in here, just highlight an estimate, hit edit, and maybe I could go off here and change the award status to something else if I wanted to, or the loss status and whatever my drop down lists are and so forth. And maybe once I get done changing one estimate, I could come down and just quickly change another estimate and so forth. So I'm not seeing the drop downs at the moment because all these estimates I had created prior to setting that up in this database and so forth, because I think these were built with a different database, but otherwise you would get your drop down of what those settings were. But the main thing is here is it's a lot quicker just to go ahead and tag an estimate, hit edit, and come in here and modify something. So that way, if I want to go through and, hey, I want to come in and put what types of projects these are, so I can come in and just, maybe I'm going to keep my general open and come down through the project types and be able to change one project type, go off and save it, edit it, change another project type, and change these up pretty quick. So that's really the only legwork I've done in these particular estimates, was kind of going through and putting that project classification on there for what type of project it was. But that's also where you could do, like I said, estimator and what owners and all sorts of different things that you could then filter by when you look at your reports. The next thing I did is I've set me up an external report. Now, this part makes it where when you think about allocating add-ons, you could write reports where you just tap right into the native views themselves and can pull my line items, and the same stuff that I'm going to show and so forth could all be done with just the native tables. The problem with the native tables is there's a few advantages to this external report helping build new tables for you. So for an example, if I had $100 worth of materials in an estimate, and let's say you had $10 worth of sales tax, you could tell it to allocate add-ons. And that way in that estimate, maybe it would show as $110 instead of the 100. If you're tapping into the native views, the data's not stored with that allocated value on that line item. So you'd have to try to go back through and figure out how much to back allocate and all that good stuff, which is pretty challenging. So that's kind of one of the benefits to setting up an external report, is it can go through and ask you if you want to allocate the add-ons and whether you want particular sort sequences set up and things of that nature. So it can automatically have that set in the data the way you want it. So when I go to do a report, I don't have to try to back into an allocated number or a non-allocated number or things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I want to create a new one here. What do you want the name to be? Whatever I want to call it. Do you want to include all the estimates in this configuration? In my case, I do. I want all my estimates. The main thing to kind of watch out in your case is for some of the clients that have got estimates out there for the last 20 some years, it might take it a while to generate it and so forth. Do you want to generate read only access to the journal to these external reports for all the users? which is really all I'm doing at this point, is really just ability to pull reports and read information and so forth. And in this case here, I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and let all users be able to do it, but that's where I could go through there and limit what users and so forth. And then I could basically tell it if I wanted to do a particular branch or something of that nature. So there again, I'm just going to leave that where it's at the moment. And apparently I've done something wrong up here. So maybe I'm going to take the dash out of there. It's probably not required, or isn't wanted. So here's that Power BI desktop one I just set up. So it's got my name, sequences. This is where I could go through. If you think about your spreadsheet tabs at the bottom of the screen, current would show whatever those are. So if you got phase and item and takeoff order and assembly and location and whatever. And the drawback with current sometimes, if you're really going to use those for some of your reports, is it's possible that someone deleted that sort sequence, or it's not set up, or things like that. So if you really know that you're going to be doing this report where I'm doing some grouping and really want those overline totals and things like that set up right, sometimes it's handy to say custom and actually go in and actually build what you want that sort sequence to be. Now, in this case, all I'm showing is all the line items and so forth. So I'm not necessarily doing any grouping or overline totals or anything of that nature. So in this case here, current's going to be fine in my case, but if you're doing anything with the overline totals, I'd probably say custom is better. So that way you can kind of hard set what is the key sort of what you're doing here. Unit conversions, kind of the same way. So when you think about, most clients don't do it. So whatever conversions are in your estimate, imperial or metric and so forth, they just have the current one. But this is where you could do custom and tell it that you want the native of what you're in your estimate, or I want to see it in imperial, or I want to see it in metric, things like that. So I could go off and do some conversions behind the scenes when it generates a subset of data for me. Generate only project and branches and totals. So if you think about, if I just want to do a report that says, okay, show me how many dollars an estimator done this year, estimated this year, or was awarded this year, and I'm just looking for like high-end project type of numbers and things like that. That's basically what that top one would do, is it would basically just let me tell it, go off and just generate the branch stuff. In this example, I want every single line item. So I really want all that detail to be generated in this report set. Generate data on estimates closed and saved. So this is basically, as you're going through, if you're just doing the branches and things like that, you can actually tell it to generate the data on close and save. So that way, basically, anytime someone closes an estimate or saves an estimate, it'll go off and regenerate this data for that estimate they're working on. So it helps keep this information up to date on that. If I'm not doing the branch level, then I could tell it, do I want to combine like items? Most of the time, probably not, because most likely I want to see a different WBS code, location, building, floor, room, construction phase, alternate, things like that. So you may or may not combine items. If you do combine items, do you want to round the quantities? Do you want to allocate add-ons? So like what I was saying, that sales tax. So if I had sales tax set to be allocatable in an estimate, if I had this checked, it would go ahead and store that material amount at $110 and also increase my price per cubic yard of concrete to have waste included on it when I see it in reports. In this case, I don't want to have the sales tax or anything allocated to skew my numbers at the moment. I just want straight material price. Do I want to include my overline? So there again, if I was doing something with sequences and overline totals, I probably do. In this case, I don't need them. Do you want to generate the excluded alternates? So if you're doing base bid and alternates, there's a status there of whether it's included or not included in the bid and so forth, or in the estimate. So this is kind of the same thing that could go through and go ahead and generate all the data, whether it's included or excluded. So in my case there, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. So that way, anything that's listed out, so that way if I've got concrete, even if it's excluded, I still want to see that in my numbers maybe. Under the next tab, estimates. Do you want to automatically include all new estimates? So whether it was created a new estimate, copied one, duplicated, imported, merged one, or whatever the case is. So this is there again, kind of depending on what I'm doing. Some people will go off and say, I only want to generate data on a particular thing, these 1 or 2 estimates. Some people, like in what I'm doing here, I want to do every estimate across the board, so I'm going to let it, go ahead and automatically. So if someone else creates a new estimate, bang, it could be in my data to be reviewed and so forth. Limit generated estimate count. This is where I could go through there and say, well, I want to limit it, so maybe I could say generate and generate just that one estimates in this subset of data. So when I do my reports, it's all just about this one estimate and that one estimate only. In this case, no, I want multiples. Restore grids would just go back and restore your grids to whatever the default was. Columns is how you come in here and turn on and off other columns. So maybe if I wanted to go through and say, all I want to generate is estimates created by Kevin. So I might come in here and say, I want estimator of Kevin. So now it's going to show me just all the estimates that were flagged by me. And that way, if I hit generate, it would just generate all the estimates that I produced. And that's another reason why having sometimes different external reports is that way. I might want to say, these are Kevin's external reports, these are Brett's external reports, or something of that nature. So that way, each person can have their own listing and see their own prices on jobs that they've done without seeing somebody else's. In this case, I'm going to look at all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to clear that filter so it goes back to all of them. And then export. This could be exported out like I've seen showed in a couple other videos and so forth, where you can export this out to do other reports and AI reports with it. Once I got what I want included in this mix, I'm just going to go ahead and hit generate here. It's going to give me a warning that I got quite a few estimates out there, so it might take a little bit. So I'm going to check the box that I know the risk and go ahead and continue. And this will take a few seconds here to build out all my data. So you'll notice it's going through and changing generate. It's turning on and delete, where I could delete the data out of the set if I wanted. And it's telling me the last time that it's been generated. So now that's a data set that I can find out there that's going to have a lot of all my estimate information and so forth stored in it, that I'll be able to write reports and do things with it. Could be allocated. It could have order line totals on it. A lot of stuff that I have pre-specified here, already set in that data set to be used for reports. Then the last thing I want to do here in the management console is I do want to take a quick look at security. So with security, this is going to go through, and by default, most of the time for estimating, we use our network domain login. So it'll be some sort of login. So that way, as soon as someone opens up estimating, it looks at your login credentials and just lets you in. Sometimes when people are doing these external reports, maybe I'm doing a Power BI report that person doesn't have, they're not logging in as one of my key users. I want a different login. So another thing that I've ran into when we start talking about external reports and things of that nature is I want to be able to put in like a SQL login, so that way I can have this login no matter who's logged into the computer and so forth. So if I want to go through and say, yep, I'm going to hit add here, I could specify what type of a role that they've got in the system and so forth. So I might say that they're administrative, they can do everything. In this case, I'm going to just give it a very limited role. My project manager is a fairly limited role in this particular case. What user ID do I want to give it? So I'm going to just say BI report, and I might give it some sort of a password. And confirm that password. And then on passwords, you can also tell it whether it needs to look at your SQL database to know password policies and password expirations, and whether the user needs to change the password the next time they log in and things of that nature. So in my case, I'm just keeping it real simple here. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep it as what I've got set here. So now when I say OK, I'll see another user on my list. So I'll see the ones that are login credentials of who the logins are. And then I will also see this BI report user. That's the one that I just set up for my Power BI report that we're going to be taking a look at in a second. That's kind of the setup stuff. So we've set up some custom fields, we flagged some estimates, we've set up this external database so that way as people are modifying estimates and working with estimates, it'll kind of keep that set updated and so forth. I've got security set up so that way I can have a different login that potentially is going to access that data and so forth. So I'm going to back out of here then. And I'm going to go to the Microsoft Store. So when I got started looking for Power BI, you may already have it on your machine. You may need it. In my case, I went to Power BI Desktop and found, whoops, that's some sort of grouping. That's not what I want, the app here. So you want to make sure this is an app. And basically in the Microsoft Store, I was able to come down and just say, give me an option to download it. And it downloaded it on my machine and I was able to open it up and use it and so forth. I know it did ask me for my login the first time in, so it's probably looking at our Microsoft account to figure out if it's part of my subscription or not. So you may have to work with your IT to get that part going and so forth. But once I told her to log in, it seemed pretty easy to get into it then. Let's open up Power BI and let's look at actually building the report then. So I'm going to say I want to do a blank report. This will have some different methods of getting to data. In my case, I'm going to say I want to get data from another source. And this is where it's going to ask me for what source do I want. Now, this is where I forgot one of the steps I wanted to talk about. So I am going to go back to my estimating. And you can get this out of estimating or the management console, either one. But I need to know the server and my SQL instance associated with estimating. So in this case here, up at the top, you'll see where it's got Bangert VM is my computer name. Sage EST 2023 is my Microsoft SQL instance name. So when I go to write a report, that information is what I'm going to need to tell these report writers to get access to the data that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go back to my Get Data screen. I'm going to say I want to get it from a database. I want to get it from a SQL server. My server name was Bangert VM, and I already forgot what the rest of it was. Sage EST 2023. Oops, it's not typing now. Sage EST 2023. So basically, that's where I put both the server and the SQL instance name in. And then what type of connection do I want? So import would just import the data in. And the only drawback with import is it's just that. It's whatever snapshot of time I imported. It doesn't update automatically or anything like that. So in this case here, I want a direct query. So later I'll be able to refresh this as people are doing estimates and things like that and be able to see these reports in real time and so forth. Okay. Let's go back. I'm going to do that again because there was one more step that I think because I was already logged in, it skipped on me. So let's go back to that SQL server again, and let's go back to no, it's not there. Where is Usually another screen that comes up before this one is a login screen. And it usually gives you a choice to use your current credentials. So like in my case where my user is set up for Windows Authentication, I could go off and use it. Or this is where I was kind of expecting that I could put in that BI report user that I just set up and use that for my credentials also. So you'll probably see that extra box. I wonder if I refresh, would that force it to? Nope, so it must already know my credentials because of doing the other one. So basically, these are all my different databases. And as I look down through the list, Power BI Desktop Report, that is the one that we just built a few minutes ago. So if I take a look at this, this is going to show everything here. It starts with the word report and kind of a little V behind it, that these are all views. So I'm not necessarily interacting with a straight table of the data and things of that nature. This is basically just a view of it. As you look at the tables though, everything practically that you can get to in an estimate is somewhere in this mess of things. So you've got your add-ons, you've got addresses for all sorts of different subs and clients and owners and things of that nature. You got your alternates and their statuses and my assemblies and branches and city cost indexes and crews, and just like I said, almost pretty much everything that you could get to with an estimate, I believe, is somewhere in this list. I want to focus on just a handful. So one of the tables that you will want to probably take a look at is just called estimate. Now, there are two tables because there's two different estimate names in the system. When you create an estimate, you name the estimate when you're setting up your branches and things like that. But then when you get to your info page, there's another area for name also. So this estimate here that I'm going to look at, this one is the name of the actual, like when I'm first starting it out, setting up the branch and giving it a name associated with the estimate. So when I'm looking at the estimate catalog and things like that, these are the names that I'm actually seeing at that point. So if that's the name that I want, this is what I would want to pull up. If I come down a little bit farther to project information, this one has name also. This is the name that's in your cover page. So depending on which one of those you really want in your reports or things like that, you might want to decide one or the other. Now, almost everything else for this report that I'm working on is actually in this one table. So this one table stores a lot of stuff. It has my classes, it's got my job size, it's got my contract amounts, it's got all my different user definable fields and what their values were. It's got all my different, if I've got a customer ID in there or an architect ID in there, I can tie it together with any of those. It's got my different versions. A lot of the same stuff, when you look at that info page, a lot of that same stuff is somewhere in this mix of things. So this will be a very, very common table, and this is what we'll drive most of our report on as far as the project class and estimate name and things like that off of this one. Another very key one is this item one. This is every single item that's in your estimate. So if I go ahead and click on it and take a look at it, for an example, it's going to have my line items, my sequence numbers and things like that. And it's going to basically have my phase, item, description, takeoff quantity, waste percentages, crews, labor, material, sub, equipment, other, all the different WBS codes that I can associate with an item. Pretty much everything about that item is stored in this table. Depending on what I'm doing, another very common table that I might want to work with is this estimate totals, report totals. This one goes off, and this is one of the special tables that's not in the typical data set. If I'm just going natively to the estimate instance, the estimate total and grand totals for labor, material, and how much dollars worth of hours, and just kind of a summary. So this is a special table that's being built out that has all my different category totals, my add-on totals, my grand totals. So there again, if I was wanting to report and I want my grand total that has all my add-ons in it for reporting purposes, this is going to be the table that I want to use. Those 4 tables there are probably the most common ones that you're going to do most of your reporting with and so forth. Now, in my case, I'm not really working with my grand totals at this moment, so I'm not going to need it. I'm also going to say that I'm not working with the actual estimate name, that basically just the project name will be enough from my project information screen and so forth. So I'm just going to work with these 2 at this particular point. But you could go through there and pick many different tables depending on what you're trying to pull in your reports. When I say load, it's going to go ahead and basically query each one of those different tables on me. And then over here on the side, this is my report. This is kind of what my data is showing at the moment. So I see my item record and I see my project record. When I have multiple tables, you need to tell the system how these tables relate. And depending on what combinations you put together, sometimes it'll automatically associate it with them, sometimes it may not. So as I look down through here, where's my estimate ID? Estimate. And let's go over here and let's say it should have an estimate ID also. So basically, estimate ID is the same as an estimate ID on the other side. So basically, that'll pull up a little relationship thing that'll say, okay, in your item record, here's kind of an example of what was in that table and your project info table. And basically, this is many to one or one to many, so I can kind of tell it how these two different tables relate with each other and so forth. So in this case here, there are many items that are in a single estimate. So that's where in my case it's going to be a many to one. And I want to make this relationship active. So that way I should be able to just say, okay. And that way it's going to draw a line between there and let me know that that is how those two tables are relating with each other. And then over here in properties, it's kind of showing you the same thing as we saw in that box that popped up. So it's basically saying that in my item list of every item in the every item in every estimate is associated with an estimate ID to my project info for its estimate ID. So that way, when I'm looking at that list, I could see what estimate name it was because of that relationship. Here's the different tables that I've got picked so far. So that's pretty much what the model view does, is it lets you go off and kind of tell it what tables am I going to use and how do they relate and so forth. And if you need to add some more columns to it and so forth, you could come back and get data and get more tables and so forth and add more tables in here as you need to. I'm going to go back to the report. This is my report. These are visualizations as far as little graphical things that you can drop in your report and then tell it how to feed the data. So that way, if I wanted to do bar charts and pie graphs and things of that nature, you could just drop it out there and tell it what fields it's going to use to sum up and all that good stuff. And then data is going to give me an opportunity to see all my different fields within these two different tables as I'm building up my report. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to build that little grid that we had that just had all the line items of every single estimate. So that's called a table. So I'm going to come down here to the one that says table. And when I click on it, it's going to basically drop that table in my view. In my case, I'm not going to use filters. I'm going to let it filter off of everything from the other slicers and things like that. So I'm just going to get that out of the way for the moment. And as I look at this visualization of this box, what do I want to see in this box? So the first thing I had in there is I had the project class. Project class is in my project information. So I'm going to come down and see if I can find I think it's called project class. Project class. So now you'll notice that it basically went through and has built a list of all of the different project classes. And let's say in addition to project class, I would like to see the name of the estimate. So I probably got some sort of a project name. And let's say that I wanted to see some different columns in. So, matter of fact, before I do, let's say that's the class, that's a project name. So maybe I want to see the line items of the estimate, so the name of the items. So I'm going to go up to the item record now, and I'm going to find the description of the items and drop it next. So this is going to get to a lot bigger list then. So now you notice that it's just kind of grown from just the class to just my project names to every single line item in my estimates. And let's say in this case here, I was looking at material, but you could do this on whatever columns you want. Now, one thing when you're looking at the data that you do have to kind of watch out for is you'll find things like labor amount, material amount, sub amount, equipment amount, but you may not find a line total or things like that. So sometimes you do have to go off and maybe write a formula to tell it to sum up the labor, material, sub, and equipment and other to give you a line total and things like that. In this case, I'm just going to pick my material stuff. So let's go say that I want a material quantity. And let's say I want the material price. And I don't want base price. Base price is if you're doing things like with city cost indexes like RS means databases and things like that, where you might have a multiplier on there or something like that. So in this case here, I'm going to say I want the material price down here, and then maybe my material amount right there. Now these are trying to sum up like items, and I don't really want it to sum up like items either. I'd rather see all my items in there. So I'm going to tell it not to summarize any of these. So that way they're just literally, if they've got to show multiple items, they're going to show multiple lines. And that's primarily so if I did want to come back and add a WBS code for a building, a floor, a room, an alternate name, things like that, it would all be available to me and so forth in also. Let's say the next thing I had on my example was the last time the price date was changed. So keep in mind, you might do your bid date. So I could say, yeah, I want it more based on when I put the estimate together or something like that. In my case, I'm going to go back and say I want to base it on the material price change. Now, this material price change is kind of a bizarre little field because let's say that I had concrete in my estimate or in my database that hasn't been changed since 2020. So let's say January 1st, 2020. If you grab that item and drop it in your estimate, that price change is still 1/1 of 2020 unless you go into that estimate and update it. So that's kind of the neat thing about this is it's truly how old that price is as far as how old was it in the database when I dropped in this estimate, or if somebody went in and actually updated this estimate, it would actually be the newer date of whatever I've put in that estimate. So that's what I kind of liked about this date when I was kind of working with things. So I'm going to just drop it out there. Now with date, it kind of put a few things in there that, what is that? That looks like a date and time. So let's say that I want to do Huh. How did I get just the date of that earlier? Well, I guess this time I'm going to have it show me the full time and date and time of when I changed it. I must not use that same field in that first example, but that's fine. Oh, let's say that's good on the data there. So that's just a table that we dropped in there. So we started with this one, we dropped a table in there, and then kind of picked the different fields that we wanted to put in our table on the report grid. So now let's say that down at the bottom I had something that gave me like the count of items and minimum, maximum, and averages and things like that. And those are called, in my visualization thing here, those are called cards. So let's say that I want to put card in here. There it is. I get confused with all the icons. Now I just overdid what I just had in there, so I'm going to hit Control Z and bring back what I had. You want to make sure that you're not clicked on something that you've already got in the report mat. So right now I've got these little boxes here, so this is my focal point. I'm going to click off of it, so that way that's not my focal point. So that way when I drop a card in here, this is going to kind of go down and show me a box that I can then put stuff in. So in this case here, maybe I want to see the material price in here. So I'm going to drop the material price in. And this is where I put multiple cards in. So I'm going to say that I want another card. And let's say material price again. And let's say that I had another card. And material price again. And let's say that I've got another card. And let's say material price again. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this one here. So right now it's saying it's going to do the sum of the material prices. And in this case here, I'm just going to say I want to do a count of them. So that way there I highlighted one item for some reason, so it's got a count of 1. So I'm going to click back on that one so it turns that off. So that's 3,500 lines of items and all my estimates out there and so forth at the moment. I'm going to come back to this one here. Let's say that I want the minimum price, which we must have some things at $0. And let's say that I want this to be on a average. And let's say that I want this one on a maximum. So now as we look at this, I can kind of see how many lines is it evaluating. Minimum, average, maximum. So in my case here, I'm going to go ahead and make some of these a little bit smaller so I can get more of this stuff on the screen at the same time. And if you notice, a red line kind of helps let you know when you're lined up with some of those things. Okay, so there's my count, minimum, average, maximum. And let's go ahead and say maybe the next thing I want to put in here is I had that thing where I could type in part of a description and show me all the line items that had that description in there. So this wasn't a standard visualization. So this button will let you get more visual pieces than what's necessary in here. So I'm going to say get more. It's going to bring you up to a list of a bunch of different things that you can put out there that I have no idea what half of that stuff is. So if I come up here to the top and say text filter, this is what I put in mine, where I was basically just using this Microsoft text filter. So it takes a moment here, and I want to add it. And now that just added this little text filter box. So I want to make sure that I'm not highlighting one of my existing ones, and I'm going to hit it so it drops that in there. And let's say that I wanted to look through my descriptions. So where's my estimate description? So let's go ahead and drag and drop that onto the box there. So then if I come back in here and said something like a nail, dun, dun, dun. Move field, rename, quick measure, group. Oh, I don't think I hit the button. Nail. Hit the button. I don't have any estimates out there. Report item description. Why does that seem smaller than what I had a little while ago? So if I drop my filter, that shows me all 3,500 lines. That sounds good. So if I went back to CONC, oh, I bet I spelled nail wrong. I think it has a capital N. There we went. Okay, so it is kind of temperamental, the upper and lowercase. So there I got nails, and I've got 70 different items with nails in it and so forth. So that's how we got that description search in there. So that way when you put in a description, you either got to hit the search button or hit enter. And then this little thing will come off and also let you erase it to go back to all of them. So there again, if I was looking for something about concrete and so forth, there's 84 lines and different estimates that have to do with concrete. So I've got some that there's 84 lines. There's some of them that don't have any dollars for some reason. The average is $64 and the maximum is $120 a yard. Let's clear that and let's go ahead and put a slice on here. So slices are kind of neat because I'm going to take this a little bit narrower and maybe a little bit taller. And let's say I'm going to put a slicer over here. So where's my slice thing? The slice was right there. And it's got a little picture of a funnel to kind of let you realize that that's kind of a filtering mechanism. So then now that it's got it on here, what do you want to use for your funnel? So one of the things I want to do is that project class. So if I come back down and find my project class and drop that on there, there's all the different project classes that I've got. So that's how I was able to say, if I wanted a retail store, that's all my retail stores. So that there again was where I said CONC, concrete. There was all the concrete in retail stores, or there was all the concrete in any office buildings and so forth, or any schools. So if you notice, all these filters kind of work in conjunction with each other. So that way it's filtering it by description and by this project class. So in this case here, I'm going to click on it again to turn that off for a moment. And I'm going to go ahead and crunch this up a little bit. And I'm going to put another slicer in there. So I'm going to put another funnel in. And this one here, let's say that I want to put it on that date changed. So I'm going to go back to my items and go see if I can find the material date changed. Material price change. So now you'll see that it's got some sort of a range selector and so forth. So there again, if I want to say, show me everything that was modified just this year. In my case, I've only got 7 items that were updated this year, so I can basically just go off and find them. Or that has the word concrete in there at least. Versus if I go ahead and clear this one, there might be 68 items that's been modified. So there again, that's kind of what makes this whole inquiry really work very powerful, is the fact that I can do a combination of descriptions, dates, project types, estimator. If I threw another slicer out there for estimators and so forth, I could have an estimator. So that way they're just my schools. Maybe I want to come back to this grid here. And let's say I want to go back up to my other table. And let's go and throw that estimator out there. So let's say that I want to put estimator in this table. So it added it there on the right-hand side. And maybe estimator, I'm going to move estimator up in the list here. So that way it now shows up before this class. So if I go off here and let's say I'm going to take my date range off. And do I have any classes? I don't have any classes. And let's go and take the conc out of here for a moment. Let's get a slicer for estimator. I'm going to go ahead and make this maybe a little bit smaller. And let's say that I want another slicer right here. And let's say that we're going to put that estimator in there. And same type of thing then. So maybe I'm going to make this a little bit smaller there too. So if I wanted to go off and say, yep, I want to see the estimates that Kevin's done. So these are all the different jobs that it says that I've done. And if I wanted to go through and say I want to see just the hospitals and clinics or something like that, maybe I can go off and see all the different hospitals and clinics that I've got flagged. Very, very powerful, as easy as it is to drop one in there. And if you notice here, I'm looking at hospitals, and apparently Brett's the only other person that's estimated in a hospital. So if I go in and click over on Brett, now going ahead and change to Brett's numbers on the hospitals and so forth. And most of these are lump sum, so I probably don't have any material prices in there, so you probably won't see any minimum, maximum averages kick in this example, but very powerful to be able to just drop a slicer on there that can help you funnel that information. And then if I go back to like all the data. Anyway, just think about how powerful that is if you wanted to go through and say, show me any time that I've done a school and what toilets are ran, what has fire alarms are ran, what has HVAC ran, things of that nature, and be able to go back and look at some subset of all these different estimates by types or by descriptions of the item descriptions and what the sub amounts were, or even the sub name. Maybe you put the sub names into next to them in your estimate, and you could see who was the sub that did that, had that budget and things like that. So very, very powerful. So if I go ahead and collapse these and make that a little bit bigger yet, you see it all in a grid and everything's just kind of all interactable for click on something and getting a list on that. Pretty easy in filtering. Let me know what you think. I think it's something that I think would help a heck of a lot of clients, but don't think that most clients do anything like that currently. So I definitely kind of encourage you to take that extra step of kind of going in there and setting yourself up a report that can use that arsenal of old estimates to help proof out current estimates that you're working on. Thanks for watching.